Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck. And it's Monday, October 27th, 2025, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. As you can see, I'm out here in the van / recording studio, and I've got a pretty interesting and lengthy Bigfoot story for you today. And, I got all this reflection off my glasses. Let me take my glasses off and see if I can. I don't need them. Boy, I look different, don't I? Anyway, this story, I've been trying to get my mind wrapped around telling you about this now for, it's been about 9 days now since the last incident that happened. And I've been hinting on my community page about shooting this thing, and I've sat down numerous times and tried to get going on it, but I'm going to try to shoot it in one long segment, but there's a lot of moving parts, and if I get off track, or if my train of thought jumps the tracks completely, then I might have to break this up into segments and link them together. But this is a long story, and my involvement actually started about 5 years ago. But in order to really tell you the backstory, we have to go back a long time, and we need to go back literally and start with geography and start with history. So I guess the best thing to do is to paint you a picture of the area we're talking about. We're talking about an area over in eastern Arizona, and it's a part of Arizona called the White Mountains. Now, the highest point in Arizona is actually the San Francisco Peaks, Humphreys Peak, north of Flagstaff. And Flagstaff itself is just under 7,000 foot, and the top of Humphreys Peak is around 12,006. That's the highest point in Arizona, but that's an isolated mountain range. It's actually volcanic in origin. But the real Arizona high country is about in the middle of the state on the eastern boundary of New Mexico, and it's called the White Mountains. Now, the White Mountains generally run kind of west to east, and everything on the south side of the crest, all the rivers and the drainages and everything run to the south. And, of course, everything on the north side runs to the north. Well, the main drainage for that whole north slope area, and for a huge area of northeast Arizona, is the Little Colorado River. Now, just to give you just a real quick snapshot, the Little Colorado River starts near the community of Greer, Arizona, and it runs north, and then it kind of turns to the northeast, and it runs through the present community of Eager, Springerville, runs straight north through St. John's. Then it kind of turns to the northwest, and it runs up near Holbrook, and where it's joined by another large tributary that runs kind of from the east to the west, clear out of New Mexico. It's called the Rio Puerco. And you'll see why that's important here in a little bit. But the Little Colorado River, it runs straight west along the Interstate 40 corridor, past Winslow, and then it turns north and west again and runs up through Navajo tribal lands, and ends up all the way running into the main Colorado River at the north end of the Grand Canyon. So just about every stream bed, including the ones right up to the north of me on the top of the Mogollon Rim, all that water and all those drainages run to the north and are collected by the Little Colorado River and eventually go in through the Grand Canyon. Well, the highest point in the White Mountains is it's the second highest point in Arizona. It's called Mount Baldy, and that's actually on White Mountain Apache tribal land. And that's, like I say, it's peaks around there 10, 11,000 feet in that area. And, they get a lot of winter up there and a lot of snow. So the Little Colorado River drains a pretty large snowshed area, as well as collects a lot of rainwater. Well, as the land goes north from that high country elevation area there, it drops down, and eventually the Douglas fir and blue spruce and aspen, they transition to ponderosa pine, and then that transitions to what we call pinon juniper woodland. And then as it gets a little further to the north, up around Springerville or so, there's very vast open prairie, grass prairie. And it's that way clear up to the Interstate 40 corridor. And so what that means basically is that, and then further north of there, by the way, is you get up into Navajo country. Well, there's been native peoples live in that area clear back from the ancestral Puebloans. And the Apache and the Navajo, actually, they are believed to have come into the area right around 1100 AD. They're actually Athabascans, and they traveled across the Bering Sea land bridge from Siberia. But before them, the older race of Native Americans, like the Hopis, the Zunis, and the Pueblo Indians out of New Mexico, are actually ancestors of the ancestral Puebloans. So there's been people in the country for a very, very long time. Now, as it kind of settled out, the Apaches, they kind of stayed down in the White Mountain area, and then the Navajos settled on the northern area. And I'm sure they traded somewhat with each other, and they probably fought some with each other as well. But there was that large, grassy, open area in between where kind of nobody lived. All right, so now let's fast forward a little bit to the first non-Native American settlement, and that was around probably the late 1860s, early 1870s. Some Spanish-speaking folks come from Mexico, kind of settled in the area of present-day Concho, along a little creek called Concho Creek, and they were followed not too far afterwards, on the mid to late 1870s. By the Mormon settlers. And they came down from Salt Lake, and they settled more to the east along the Little Colorado River itself. And they established the communities of St. John's, Springerville, and Eager, and a couple other communities out there as well. But we're going to focus kind of in this particular area. Well, you know, the country was growing, the West was growing, and the U.S. government, as an incentive to get the railroad to build a transcontinental railroad. Now we're up late 1870s, early 1880s now. Well, they gave the railroad vast areas of land in exchange for them building the transcontinental railroad. And the route they took was coming out of New Mexico, was right down the Rio Puerco, that big open grass valley, down the Rio Puerco, to where it meets with the Little Colorado River, followed the Little Colorado River to the west, and then the railroad continued westward up through what is now present-day Flagstaff and so forth. But this land that was given to the railroad, the government surveyed this vast area, and they broke it into townships. And so if you're not familiar with what a township is a big square. 6 miles on a side, 36 square miles, with the northern boundary being east to west. So there's just a collection of these great big 36 square mile boxes out there. Well, the government gave the railroad large numbers of these townships, but what they did is they broke it into a checkerboard pattern. And basically, if every township, if you went straight north, there was a township owned by the government, the same straight east, straight south, straight west. And the railroad-owned property would be diagonals. So they only touched at a point. Well, some of these, a lot of it became ranch land and private land, but the reason why I'm going with all this is to tell you that there's a large amount of government-owned land. Some of it's BLM, some of it ended up being the property of the state of Arizona. But there's this checkerboard pattern exists all the way across northern Arizona, anywhere close to the right-of-way. So that means that any development, ranching development, and so forth. They dealt with this checkerboard pattern of government land, and so the Mormons over along the Little Colorado River, they were farmers, and then they were also built ranches, and the ranches tended to be on these townships of private land with the government land all the way around them, and the various communities built up. Well, Concho, which now this is all, by the way, this is the part that we're talking about is the southern end of Apache County, and Apache County and the next county to the west, which is Navajo County, and you can look all that up on a map. They start out in the White Mountains, and they're tall, skinny counties, and they run all the way to the Utah state line, and Apache County runs all the way up the New Mexico state line, up to the Utah state line. So the whole northern part of Apache and Navajo counties is actually up on Navajo tribal land, Navajo Nation land. All right, now, so why have I told you all this? Well, let me fast forward just a little bit more, and then I'll back up and tell you why I'm telling you all this. The little community of Concho, originally, like I say, was a Spanish community. People from Mexico moved up there. Well, in the late 60s, early 70s, a developer came in, and he had huge plans for Concho, and they actually started a separate community from Old Concho, which is located about a mile and a half away, kind of up on a little mesa, which mesa is Spanish for plateau, and they called that little community Concho Valley. And they subdivided some property and put some housing in, and there's a Arizona State Route 61 goes right through the middle of all that, and it goes from Show Low, Arizona, up to St. John's, and kind of at a diagonal, kind of from the southwest to the northeast. So Concho, they plotted out a huge area of Concho. They put in a golf course and a park, and I mean, they had huge plans for the place. Well, in some of the rural area, they managed to conglomerate several of these townships, and this is where the township thing comes in. And they managed to accumulate some of this stuff, and they had quite a large area. And so not only the town site of Concho, when they put in a school and they put in a library and all that stuff's still there, and but they also, in the kind of the fringes of the community, they surveyed out a lot of 40-acre parcels. And what's that significant is that under Arizona real estate law, if a developer puts in 40-acre parcels, he doesn't have to meet all the subdivision requirements. All he has to do is provide access. And they do access by easements. And the easements, most of them are roads. So they don't have to put in electricity. They don't have to provide water service or anything else. All they have to do is provide access to the property, and they can sell 40-acre parcels. Okay, once you buy a 40-acre parcel, here again under Arizona real estate law, you can divide that 3 times. And you can divide it into 3 parcels without being considered a developer. So what that meant is a lot of these people would buy a 40-acre parcel, they'd split it, they'd sell that off, then those people would split their property. And so what you ended up with is you end up with these little communities, little isolated communities out there. But there were also a lot of places where you could buy cheap 40-acre parcels. And the Apache County and Navajo County, and actually all of the rest of the counties across that whole east to west route across northern Arizona, a lot of them are pretty open to alternative housing, such as earthship type homes off grid, tiny houses, all this kind of stuff. And the land still to this day is some of the cheapest land you can buy anywhere. And some of it is pretty darned isolated. And so now let's kind of bring you up to a little more the other angle to this. And you'll see where it ties in here in a little bit. Well, obviously the forest people, our Sasquatch friends, have lived in this area for a long time as well. And for many, 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 many years, they dealt with the ancestral Puebloan people, and later on they dealt with the Apache and the Navajo. And the Apache and the Navajo both have many stories. The Apache refer to him as the hairy man, and the Navajo refer to him as both the hairy man and the howler. And I've even heard a Navajo word, Awetso. And Awetso basically translates to distant relative. And it's another way they refer to the Sasquatch people. Well, for probably, good grief, thousands of years, the Sasquatch people had this area pretty much to themselves. Well, as soon as the early Anglo-European settlers and the settlers that come up from Mexico, as soon as they started moving in a little bit, there started becoming stories of conflict, night conflict, and around Concho especially, there came to be stories of what came to be known as the Concho monster. And the Concho monster was, large, hair-covered, screaming thing came in the night, all this kind of stuff. And, the story kind of parallels what down in our area. We have what they call the Muggione monster. But the Concho monster would torment people when they'd move into a rural area. And so the old families, the ones that go back generations, and remember we're only talking about back to the late 1870s. So what are we talking about? 150 years or so. And but the old families all have stories. And they don't talk about it much with outsiders. And then as some of this more recent development has come along, now this area has become kind of a haven for people who are trying to escape the big city and escape civilization. And remember, there's always been people that have lived basic lifestyles off grid, and but now with the advent of such things as solar power, and now especially satellite internet, it's a lot easier to live very remote and live off grid than it's ever been. And another thing that entered into it in the last however many years is something as simple as the backhoe. Because now, if you live off grid, and you can buy an old used backhoe, and they're not really very expensive, you can maintain your own road, and you can move dirt, whatever you have to do. You can build your road. You can, move your dirt wherever it needs to go. Dig your footing, dig your septic tank, all this kind of stuff. You can do all that yourself, and it's pretty simple. And so something initially as simple as the backhoe, and now followed up by the technology of solar and satellite internet and all this kind of stuff, it's easier to live off-grid in very remote areas than it's ever been. Well, this area from Concho, basically the whole Concho area, but also south west down toward Sholo, which is actually in Navajo County, there's getting to be quite a lot of housing in there, and there's people moving in there. And so now let's fast forward to my involvement. Well, about 5 years ago, I was contacted by a lady who was having some strange happenings on her property. And I've talked about her before. And I will tell you right now that I'm gonna, in order to protect people's privacy, I'm gonna be a little bit vague on a couple of things here. But not only names of some of the humans involved, but also names of some of the Sasquatches involved, especially one particular one, which this story is basically about. And so anyway, I went up along with my partner Kevin, and we went up there and we met with her, and we explained to her what was happening, what was going on, and we actually helped her initiate contact with the Sasquatch family that ended up living near her. And so she started she had a gift for mind speak, still has actually, and so she started getting pretty common. It was pretty common for her to have contact with them. Well, the first time I ever went up there, I was mind speaking with somebody or other, and I had no idea it was a male, but I had no idea who he was or anything like that, and I managed to offend him. And the way I managed to offend him was I asked if I could speak to an elder. Well, he was an elder. Now, I didn't know that, and I had the best of intentions, but there's more behind that, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a little bit. But anyway, that first time when I left, he told me, "Don't come back." And I was up there another time, and he told me to not come back. And I haven't actually been there in quite a while. But gradually, we started learning a little bit more about him. And I started, another fella up there that tried moving into a very remote area, started having conflict. And what happens up there, and this is kind of a, I guess it's kind of a well-kept secret among the real estate folks up there, is that it's real common for somebody that they get real excited. They're going to build their retirement dream home up there somewhere. And so they go and talk to a realtor, and the realtor takes them out and shows them some of this very remote, wide open property, 40 acres, all your own, and build your dream off-grid home here. And so a lot of those people will buy a piece of property, and the first thing they want to do is go camp on it. Well, there's a long history of people having just an absolute terrible time. There's been stuff things happen during the night, and there'll be creatures come and scream at them and just absolutely terrify them. And the thread that comes through there is that they will go back to the realtor. They'll put that piece of property back on the market. And the common thread there is they'll tell the realtor, "We're leaving and we're never coming back." Well, when I was told that, I know enough about the Sasquatch people to know that it's not likely that they're really going to harm me. But I also know that a lot of them don't like us very much. Well, another fellow moved in to a fairly remote area away from any other houses. And he immediately started having issues. Well, he'd had, as a young man, he'd lived in Oregon, and he'd had some contact in Oregon. And the first time that he saw shadowy figures moving around his brand new property, there with a tent, he immediately knew what it was. And so he decided that he wasn't going to cave for that. And so he immediately started having interactions. Well, interactions on his place came to a head one night, and he had a face-to-face with a very large Sasquatch in full solid form, trying his best to intimidate him. And to make a long story short, he opened fire and he shot him with a shotgun, shot the Sasquatch. Well, when he told me about this story, I kind of questioned whether that even really happened or not. But then I got confirmation from another source up there, and this source and this guy didn't know each other. And the family group over where this other lady that I was talking about, where she lived, that's been talking to her, they were very alarmed when this event took place, because they didn't know, and they knew who this big one was, and this guy had actually seen him, and so we nicknamed him Big Gray. And we didn't know what his name was at the time, but we nicknamed him Big Gray. And Big Gray is obviously gray in color, but he's about 12 foot tall, and this guy estimated he probably weighs around 2,000 pounds. He's huge and very, very vicious demeanor. Now, let's get back to the whole thing about, are they dangerous or not? Or, could that one have killed him when he shot him with a shotgun? Well, yeah, he could. Absolutely. He could have just walked right up there and ripped him to pieces before he could have done anything, or he could have just reached out and zapped him to the point where he paralyzed him, where he couldn't move, and then just walk up to him and rip him to pieces at leisure. He didn't do that, and they don't do that. And the reason why they don't do that is because it's part of their spiritual beliefs that they're not supposed to harm humans. Now, as a part of this, as we started learning a little bit more about him, we learned what his name was. And I'm going to use, and you notice I interchange the term we and I in places, and because part of this I was involved with other people, and part of this I was by myself. And so we learned what this individual, Big Gray, we learned what his real name was. But the Sasquatches, who were clearly afraid of him, they told us, don't say his name, you'll summon him. It's kind of like the movie Beetlejuice, So we've been pretty careful not to say his name, and I'm not going to tell you what his name is, because I don't want anybody going up there and trying to reach out to this guy. We were told that he and a small group of his followers absolutely detest humans. They hate us. And in trying to determine why that is, we were told quite simply that he looks upon us as like we look upon mice. If there's only a few of us around, we're not a problem. But when there becomes too many of us, it becomes a problem that needs to be dealt with. Well, it's kind of, like I say, we think about mice that way too, don't we? So it's not that he hates any individual ones of us, it's there's too many of us, and we're moving into their territory. Now, there's stories up there, too, of people who bought that 40-acre parcel way out in the middle of nowhere, and they brought a trailer in and put it on the property, and the next time they come up, because they all live somewhere else, the next time they come up, the trailer has been absolutely smashed to pieces, flattened. There's stories of that, too. But like I say, the real estate people, they all got stories about, the people buying a piece of property, coming back in and saying, we're leaving and we're not coming back, and putting the property back on the market again. Well, why do the real estate people mind that? They get to sell it again. Their job is to sell property, not necessarily to establish residence there. And so, will they talk about it? Well, I've been up there a couple of times and tried to broach the subject, and I haven't been able to get anybody to be very candid with me about it. But I've heard enough stories that I'm sure that's what's going on. So I've been up there several times now, and I've had mind speak, even remote mind speak, with some of the ones that live up there, and I got a few of the names of the ones that live there. Well, my friend, the lady that lives up there, she had to move off property for a while. And when she went back, her place, which was nothing more than a single-wide trailer at the time, her place was basically uninhabitable. And she'd always been planning on building a house. And so now she's in the process of wanting to move back out there. And she had a spot where she wanted to put her house. And she was wanting to make sure, there were some other issues about that location. So she wanted to make sure that her local Sasquatch family, now she's got quite a bit of acreage out there now, well over 50 acres on her property. And there's a Sasquatch family that actually lives on that property. So the question is it her property, or are they living on her property, or is she living on their property? Well, she looks upon it now that she's living on their property, but she, by our laws, she owns it. But anyway, so she's ready to build her house, and she's wanting to get the blessing of the local Sasquatch family for the location of the house to make sure it's okay. And she had not been able to get anybody really to talk to her about it. And so she's out there by herself. She's a widow, and so she's been questioning whether or not she should go forward with her plan to build her house, and or whether she should, at her age, whether she should just scrap the whole idea and just move someplace in town. And so she was having real conflicting thoughts about all this, and she'd even started looking at a few houses in town. She's been living in town with some friends right now, and but she's coming to the point now where she's getting ready to break ground to build her house. And so she calls me every once in a while and talks to me on the phone, and So she was telling me about all this, and she said, they haven't been talking to me. I don't know if they're mad at me or what the deal is, but I can't get them to talk to me. Well, I theorized out there that part of the reason why they hadn't is because Big Gray has a lot of influence out there, and the family groups out there are kind of afraid of him. And he's probably told them, don't interact with the humans. And so basically, my suggestion to her, she asked me if I could reach out and see if I could find out anything. And so my suggestion to her was to go up on the little hill there on the property and just go up there with a camp chair and just sit down and say, hey, we need to talk. And just, clear her mind as much as possible and just talk to him and tell him, hey, this is the time that I need to make this decision. Now, if I want to be here, and if you want me to be here, I want to be here. If you don't want me to be here, well, then, I'm not going to do anything that you don't agree with. And so she went and did that. And this was about 10 days ago. Now, I've been trying to make this video for about a week. And but every time it seems like I sit down, I have trouble keeping my thoughts together, and my mind goes off chasing rabbits or something. So anyway, you can kind of see where all this is kind of connected back again. Now, I actually, when she asked me to reach out, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I got to thinking about that. And this is before she went up and sat on the hill with the camp chair. And I was reaching out, and I know a couple other names up there, and I was kind of trying to see if I could make contact with any of them, long distance. And what's interesting is, as I'm telling this story right now, I'm actually getting tingled. So they know I'm telling you this story. Somebody's tingling me right as we speak. But anyway, moving on. Is I woke up in the middle of the night and I had to use the restroom, and I laid back down and I got to thinking about this because this lady, she was really wanting some answers, and she had mixed feelings about what was going on, and she wasn't sure what she should do. And so I was laying there, and the more I got to thinking about it, the wider awake I was. And so, we're talking 3 o'clock in the morning, and I tried reaching out to some of the ones that lived up there, and I couldn't get anybody to answer me. And so finally I got, I'm going to just take a chance. And so I started reaching out to Big Gray using his real name. And oh my golly, I reached out to him. I asked him if he was there. He answered me immediately. Very, very strong energy. Boom. I was laying in my bed here at my house, and I felt his energy. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly. It was kind of unfriendly, and it was kind of, what do you want? So I told him. And I said, I understand that you don't like humans, and I understand that you don't like me in particular, but I'm trying to help this lady, and I'm trying to help her make her decision. So if you don't want to talk to me, that's fine, but can you have one of your others up there talk to me? And I made a suggestion about a young female that I've had contact with before. And I said, maybe if you tell her it's okay to talk to me, that's fine. I have the utmost respect for your people. I understand your position. And I understand why you don't like us moving onto your land. But I can't control any of that. I can try to be a good human, but I can't control other humans and what they do. Well, I had also, the night before all this happened, I had also talked to my friend in Utah about it, because he has contact with a couple other Sasquatch elders up there on a pretty routine basis, and he has a gift for mind speak. And so I said, there's two of them, two male elders up there. One of them's name is Mickelboss, and the other one's name is Imnock. And Imnock is a little over 100 years old, and a lot of those Sasquatch folks know each other. And so I told my friend in Utah, I said, if you get a chance, ask him if he knows Big Gray, and by his real name, of course, and see if he'll tell you anything about it. Well, that morning after I had this conversation with Big Gray, well, I was sitting in my chair having coffee after I'd gotten up, and I got the tingle, and by golly, it was that young female. And she was talking to me, but it sounded to me like somebody was standing right there and kind of telling her what to say. And so, anyway, I'll tell you what I got a little bit later. But later that afternoon, I heard from the lady up there. And she had taken the chair and sat up on the hill. And she just said, just like I suggested, she said, we need to talk. I'm at this point where I want to do this, but I don't want to do it if you don't want me here. And so a couple of them, whether they were supposed to talk to her or not, a couple of them did. And basically what they told her was that they knew that she loved the land there, and she knew that there was nobody else that loved the land as much as she did, and this is where she belonged. And when she called me to tell me about that, she was overjoyed. So later on that evening, then I heard from my friend in Utah, and he had talked to MNOC, and MNOC said yes, he knew this individual, and he said that yes, he's had a problem with humans, and his problem with humans went clear back before we white folks came. He was having problem with the native people before we humans were even on the scene. And one thing I glossed over and I meant to say is that, I've talked before about ages and that they have a lifespan about 3 times ours. Well, there's some people that claim they live even longer than that, and that some of them live incredibly long times. And back when the guy that when this incident occurred where the guy shot Big Gray with a shotgun, we'd actually asked the people of the other place, we'd asked them how old he was. And the number we were given at that time, and remember now, this is probably 4 years ago, the number we were given at that time was 387. So if he was 387 years old then, now he's a little over 390 now, and which meant that, he's very, very old, even by their standards. And so he was there back when the Indian people were there, and we weren't. So he's been around to see this whole change that's come in, and especially now with the advent of solar panels and backhoes and satellite internet and roads and people wanting to get off grid. And he just absolutely despises humans. So quite some time ago, I kind of wondered, is there a possibility that this individual, this 390-year-old huge Sasquatch male elder that we're referring to as Big Gray, is it possible that he is the Concho monster they've been talked about for years? Well, the more I got to thinking about it, the more I thought, maybe this is true. And I can't quite explain how, but it's kind of one of those things that I know, but I don't know how I know it. And so maybe at some point in time, maybe in my sleep or something, I've been told that yes, that is true. And the stories behind the Concho monster are all true. And that the one that we refer to now as Big Gray is what they were dealing with 100 years ago. Now, can I prove that? No, I can't. There's no way I can. It seems logical. It's all connected. But Big Gray, his big thing is there's just too many of us. There's too many rooftops. we're constantly moving. More of us are moving into their territory. And he is one of those many elders who absolutely despises us and doesn't want to have anything to do with us. But it all connected. The lady that lives there was told that that's where she is supposed to live. My friend in Utah, relaying what Emnock had told him, was that this individual, Big Gray's dislike for humans dates clear back before we white folks were even around. But what was I told that night? Or the next morning, I should say, by this young female, when I think Big Gray was probably standing right next to her telling her what to say? I was told very simply that she would probably be better off living in town. So she was told something different. My friend from Utah was told that. Oh, and let me say one other thing that Emnock told my friend from Utah. And he said that Emnock told him that he knew the situation, he knew Big Gray, and he knew her, and that she would be happier living with her animals because she has horses and dogs. So she got one side of it. My friend in Utah through Emnock got another side of the story, and I got just a slightly different version of it. And but I think maybe the story I got might have been coerced a little bit. So I have no idea whether this whole thing ties together. It seems like it should. It's been quite the. I've been going on now. We're over 40 minutes on this video. But I told you that it was going to be a long story with a lot of moving parts. This is the first take. I think I actually got it. And I guess at this point, like I always tell you, you can believe or disbelieve any part of it that you want. And if I'm looking at the screen funny, it's because somebody's trying to call me on the phone. I'm going to let it go to voicemail. I know who it is. And so, fascinating story. Maybe true, may not. But I'm relaying it to you as it happened up to this recent thing that happened about just a week ago. So as I always tell you, take care of each other, love each other, take care of yourself, show gratitude for what you have. If you happen to be somebody that lives over in that area and has stories, I would love to hear them. I've collected quite a number of stories from that area through a number of different sources. And so I know that area is very active. I know that there's a sizable Sasquatch population there. And so I want to hear your stories. And in the description on this video, I'll put in my email. So if you have a story or know somebody who has, reach out to me by email because I'd like to hear that story. And very interesting area over there. And what can I say? Fascinating story. And I guess for now, really nothing more to do than to tell you until I talk to you again. Peace out.